There are many comments and remarks that state if Operation Barbarossa would have started a month earlier, it would have been a success, or at least that Moscow could have been taken. This is a common belief, and in the past I also thought it was true. But life is about learning, so let's take a closer look. The argument that an early attack date would have allowed a successful outcome rests mainly on one assumption, namely that the Russian winter stopped the Wehrmacht. This assumption also directly implies that the German army only suffered minor losses. So let's take a look at what we know. In June 1941, the German army attacked with about 3.1 million men. At the same time, the German army had about 400,000 trained reserves. 80,000 of those men were directly attached to the fighting units as field replacement battalions. After just 4 weeks, these battalions were used up. German reserves soon dried up, and by the end of November 1941, the German army had a lack of 340,000 men. At first, it doesn't seem too much, but many non-combat roles were assigned to local volunteers to free up Germans for combat roles. And since the combat units sustained the highest losses, many of those 400,000 reserves replaced combat veterans, substantially decreasing the overall effectiveness of the army. Let's take a look at the figures for tanks. In total there were 3,400 tanks. In the beginning of September 1941, 700 of those were total losses. 560 were either total losses or non-operational, and 540 were being repaired, leaving about 1,600 operational tanks. Furthermore, in early November 1941, the Organization Department of the General Staff assessed the combat effectiveness of the infantry and tank divisions. The conclusion was that the combat effectiveness of the infantry was at 65% and that of the tanks at 35%. This clearly shows that Operation Barbarossa wasn't a walk in the park for the German army. Another aspects are of course logistics. The German army had to cover huge distances up to 700 miles or 1,200 kilometers. There was a lack of trains and the German army was under-motorized. The vast distances, the speed of the advance and the poor infrastructure wore down the existing vehicles rapidly. The German army had about 500,000 motor vehicles on the Eastern Front, ranging from motorcycles to trucks. About 20% were lost by the end of 1941. A number that couldn't be properly replaced, and the situation with horses wasn't any better. This lack of transportation units not only resulted in major logistical problems but also decreased the mobility of the combat units. The significant losses in men and equipment, the limited amount of supply and the continuous fighting left the German army exhausted. There was no quick victory in sight and the front commanders were aware of the situation. This is reflected by the results of the meeting in mid-November, where the High Command wanted to conduct further offensive operations, whereas the frontline commanders opposed them. Hence, when General Winter finally arrived, the German army was already in a critical situation. If Barbarossa had started a month or even 2 months earlier, the losses, the overstretched supply lines and the exhaustion would have been pretty much the same. Thus, a different starting date would have made only a minor or no difference at all. There were several factors that were crucial for the failure of Barbarossa, but the starting date wasn't one of them. Thank you for watching, please like, comment, share and subscribe, and see you next time.